one of the really important lessons that I've learned and I try and communicate to people I mentor and everything is um, being able to identify and clarify kind of what gets you excited in life. Like we all have bills to pay or we all have obligations we have to take care of, and you can't change on a dime. But if we aren't intentional about defining a vision that gets us excited, we're never going to get there. And we might have a very successful life on paper and a very relatively happy life. And that's fantastic. But if we want to find some true underlying joy in life, we need to think through and develop a vision and begin to work towards it. And so, in real simple terms, take a little time to be intentional about developing that vision.
I'm never surprised. But anyway, hey, welcome to the show. Today we're joined by Mr. Neil Soskin. And so, Neil, could you please briefly introduce yourself and say a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
I'd love to introduce myself, Dustin. Thank you for including me or inviting me today. And it is maybe given the blooper we just edited out, I should go back and introduce you as well. But in any case, it's great to be here. I'm I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm a real estate advisor. I help folks, families in commercial real estate with their properties as well as with the companies. I do a lot of work with generational transition and leaders going through, growing into leaders, young leaders growing into it. I've got close to 40 years of experience in commercial real estate. We'll get into details later. It's been a great journey for me, one of constant growth. And that's probably the best theme for me thinking about the last 40 years, just continuing to grow and learn. So I appreciate the chance to share a little bit with you and learn about your journey too.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You put that well. I feel like you encapsulated, but in the conversations that I've had with you before, it's so much more than that. And like most people that have been in their career and had a journey, it's so much more than just your title. And so that's what's really fun about having these conversations, to be able to go through that, the genesis, but then also the process of becoming who you are and what it is that you do. So let's from the beginning, because don't want to spend too much time here because there's a lot of today that we need to talk about. But where'd you start out? Like where were you born? Where were you raised?
So the headlines on the personal: grew up in the Midwest, suburban Detroit, kind of classic middle class suburban upbringing. Very blessed, although I probably didn't realize it at the time. Great opportunities all throughout. School there, went to University of Michigan, go blue. Wolverines, not our best football season, but we're still there. And moved to Northern California, to San Francisco, right out of college. I started working as a CPA, went to grad school a few years later at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and then transitioned to the commercial real estate world. The high level is I was a broker. I did some leasing in-house. I did some development, some analysis, ran a couple of companies, and now I'm working more as an independent advisor. That's kind of the details. Lived in California up until 5 years ago, my whole adult life, and now in Houston, Texas. Moved here for love. My wife is from Houston and wanted to be close to some of her family, so we moved from Santa Monica to Houston, and loving it. It's a great place.
That's great. Yeah, the time I spent in Houston, the times I've spent in Houston have been great, and all the people there so friendly, so warm. Yeah, that's amazing. So congrats on the move.
Thank you.
Let's talk about you being a CPA and then getting into commercial real estate. What type of CPA work were you doing, and then what was your introduction into the commercial real estate world?
I don't know if I want to go there. Me being a CPA was so long ago, I can, barely. It's actually
I'm not asking you to crunch any numbers or anything.
The number crunching part is easy. It's the other part, the rules and the laws and the tax laws and all that. I went to work for a fairly large regional firm and spent 3 years. They were great, but I learned pretty quickly it was not a career for me. That in a lot of ways, I wanted to do more, get more, my hands dirty more than being in the numbers. And at that level, I was immature because end up being really strategic advisors to people. But at the level I was at in my early 20s, 21 years old when I started, all I saw was just a lot of work with numbers and not the advisory kind of strategic thinking that went into being a truly high level accountant and financial advisor. And my transition, I was in grad school, Northern California in the mid 80s. I was all set to go to high tech. I was going to go work at HP or Apple. And unfortunately, and I say that tongue in cheek, I listened to a mentor of mine, a partner at the CAP firm, had become a CFO at a real estate firm, and he kind of seduced me, come work for me. It's how do you say no to a mentor? I didn't. And that was probably 1987. And I've been in commercial real estate ever since.
Did you did you like it immediately? And what was your first take on the industry and how you fit?
Absolutely. And I've had all the roles. I started more financial and analytical, and then I got into some development, planning, and project management. Invited to learn leasing, which was a little scary. I was going to go into sales and marketing, but a guy who had done it very passionately, loved it, convinced me, and it turned into a really a lifelong journey of understanding that sales is not what we think it is. Those of you who have not spent a lot of time in, it's 100% relationships to do it effectively and do it kind of long term. And it became a love affair for me with understanding the nature of people and relationships. And it's a common thread through the rest of my career for the last close to 40 years.
So for that time when you're doing these different things, like what is that stretch with that firm? When you said you're doing some of the leasing and doing those things, was this like with that company like 5 years or so, 10 years, or what was that tenure?
So the first real estate job I had was about 3 years. There was a hotel development company, and I did a little bit of everything. Small company. They didn't know how much I didn't know. They gave me the opportunity to do lots of things. And fortunately, I didn't make any huge mistakes. But it was we were way over our skis working on, a team of 15 people working on two or $300 million worth of real estate development, way, way over our skis. But I learned a lot, didn't get to make much money. And then I moved into a more institutional environment where I was doing large scale shopping center acquisitions and potentially some development, and then moved into leasing. And actually, it's interesting, Dustin, if I can take a little bit of a fork in the road here, a creative
Oh,
fork in the
please.
road.
Yeah, let's go.
Thinking about our conversation in advance, and I glanced at a couple of your other podcasts and read a little bit about your podcast. And I really clued into your name, tools, talents, and techniques. And as I was thinking about that, I realized that my own career kind of follows that tools, talents, and techniques kind of journey. And from my perspective, the tools portion, I've worked in every aspect of commercial real estate: leasing, property management, asset management, development, acquisitions. And I learned all kinds of tools over the last 35 years. And fortunately, along the way, I had a couple of people who encouraged me and then trained me to give me tools of leadership. And with that became the tools associated with the relationships. So this career I had over 35 or 40 years, probably 8 to 10 years of that, 10 years of that was me, different versions of being on my own. And the other 30 years working for half a dozen other companies. I picked up those tools. And along the way, less directly, but almost through osmosis, I absorbed lots of talents and realized that there were certain talents that I had that I didn't know I had, or they were latent, and I had to feed them. I had to cultivate those talents. A love of people. Like, we all think we like people. I really developed a love of understanding people at a whole different level and move. As a leader, initially, I was the hard guy, always the first guy in, last guy out, my way or the highway. I was never rude, but very demanding. And then over time, I matured and I learned the whole nature of pulling the best out of people in a positive way and really doing it with a lot of intention, certainly a lot of respect, and the importance of service as a leader. The concept of servant leadership. It's another talent that just kind of all of a sudden showed up, literally in the 90s in a role I had all of a sudden I was leading a team of 12 or 13 people and indirectly another 30 or 40 people. I found what was most satisfying, what was getting the most results was when I was serving those people in a very intentional way. And with that came teaching. And then a few years later, I realized back when I was an undergrad in the early 80s, I had dreamed of being a teacher. And so my career was able to pull out these seeds of those talents. And then finally, the techniques, very obviously to me in the last 10 years, I've learned a whole bunch of techniques which bring me to where I am today. There's a concept called conscious leadership, which has to do with intention and approaching leadership from the idea of being very open handed, lots of questions and curiosity. Mindfulness in the last few years, through dealing with my own stress and anxiety and just, life in a complicated world, trying to work 60 hours a week or whatever mindfulness and meditation that comes with that. I've developed the last 10, well, closer to 20 years, a passion for reading about philosophy. So Stoicism and just certain aspects of Jewish spirituality and Taoism, all those things weave into the way I approach people, the techniques and tactics and how I deal with things. And then it's come through in the way I coach. And I've learned some specific coaching techniques. So it's just interesting how, as I thought about my history, it ties very cogently to your tools, talents, and techniques.
Well, yeah, and so I don't think you took a fork in the road. You went right down the middle because that's what these conversations are, and what I want to know, and when I'm impressed with people and who they are and their journeys, it's like, well, we dance around all of these things, but really that's what we're trying to tease out. Are those things like what are the tools that you use? What are the talents that you have discovered through your journey, and what are some techniques that give you an edge? And I think you just really laid that out perfectly. And so I want to dive into some of more of the, actually, let's go towards the end. Let's talk about the spirituality piece and the mindfulness and the consciousness, because I know before, and this happens fairly often when I'm talking to people, you can generally know when someone has a joy about them, that there's something else, that there's something bigger than just what you're talking about. When it's real estate, when you're talking about commercial real estate, when people seem to be just as focused on the people that are working and living in the real estate as the brick and mortar itself, that comes out. And so tell me about that, like how you're awakening and how these things all tie together on your end.
So, we all have, with the benefit of hindsight, we all can identify pivotal points in our lives. And they may be small points that just somehow, right? Or it may be a big trauma, right? But we have these pivotal points where we learn something. And for me, my journey around philosophy, spirituality, and kind of stepping back from the very traditional type A, lots of intensity, not afraid to show my passion, because that's the way I was trained and raised and really operated for the first 25 years of my professional life and a personal life. Happened in 1995. I can remember it very clearly. I had a gentleman working for me. I'd known him for about 10 years in the real estate business. He was working for me. We were in a startup growth company. The details aren't important, other than the fact that he was a project manager. We were doing a rollout and he was doing all kinds of construction work. He was working for me. Like, and all of a sudden he's pushing back on me. And all of a sudden he's questioning me in ways. And it's like, well, what's with that? And so it turned into a conversation, and I began to see a whole side of him that has to do with spirituality, a very rich side to him. And he really became a mentor of mine, even though he was, quote, working for me. He happened to be a few years older than me. And he gave me a book. I still have it. It was a Christmas present in 1994. He inscribed it. That's why I remember the date. I've probably read it cover to cover 60 or 70 times. It's called The Tao of Pooh. Tao as in Taoism, and Pooh as in Winnie the Pooh. And as you might imagine from the title, it is a children's comic book version of what Taoism is about. And it just opened my mind to this whole idea of philosophy. I mean, I went to college. I was a pretty well-educated kid, and I got very little exposure to it. So that was a real important pivotal point for me in terms of starting to embrace that, the spirituality. From that, I started doing more reading. In the last 10 or 15 years, my wife, second wife, she introduced me to very directly to mindfulness and meditation, which became a big part of the way I live my life. I mean, one of the most grounding things that I do almost every day, when I'm on my A game every day, is I have a morning practice that's some version of meditation, journaling, maybe some reading, philosophic or spiritual reading. If I either exercise or I at least go for a little bit of walk, I get some movement, ideally some fresh air. And that's the first 90 minutes of my day almost every day. And the days I don't do that, those aren't quite as good a day.
That's the recipe for me. That morning practice. And what's amazing to me, one of the many things that's amazing is once you find that place when you can figure out what you are, like who you are when you're just sitting there breathing in silence or with like a sound or whatever, but when you're fully present and you know who that is and you know what that feels like, the more aware you can become of when you're not that. And so when you just said that, when you're on your A game, you start to notice it, not to beat up on yourself because you didn't do your practice this morning. But when I have found that when I'm really angry or really excited or whatever, like my flags go up and I know that, oh wait, this isn't the base me. This isn't the base me. And then that gives me that brief moment or moments to pause. Like, don't make any big decisions or any rash decisions right now or get mad or get anything because it's not going to be coming from the base you. So yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Well, and I think you just described one of the key tenets and resources of mindfulness, which is we can't control our reactions. Life comes at us, and we cannot control that. We can control our response. At least when we're on our A game, we can control our response. And when we do things that allow us to be in a better position to control that response, we just live a better life. And sometimes those things are grounding ourselves every morning. So our body and our minds and our emotions are just in a more grounded place. We're not excited. Life's still going to happen. Bad things are going to happen, right? Or it's the practice. You talked about how we get used to the idea of pausing. It's like a muscle that we work out of that slow down. I mean, the meditation I did this morning, I had a very early breakfast meeting. So what's the meditation I chose this morning? Because I thought I was running late. I did a 15-minute meditation. It was all about slowing down. Just slow down.
Because a lot of people that get into meditation, they're like, oh yeah, I tried it before. It didn't work for me. I didn't do it. You're like, okay, like how long when you got into your practice did it start to click for you that this was something that was important and that you wanted to keep pursuing?
Not only is it, I'm going to answer your question indirectly because it's not only a time, it's hard to tell. It's not it's not an epiphany, at least for me. It's a slow, as a friend of mine used to refer to it, it's the drip method. And it just over time, I finally realized I was being less reactive. Over time, I realized my focus was a little bit better. Over time, I got feedback from people who were on my team that I worked with. What's different? Something's different, Neil. And so it was very little things that over time, just like, oh, there's a difference here.
There was a bit of an epiphany that I had at one point, and I was on a good streak of daily meditation, and it became like not a competition because it wasn't like I was competing against anybody else, but I was on a good streak of meditate, and then one day I missed it, and I missed one, and then I got upset. I was like, oh, man, I broke the streak, and then I was like, wait a minute, why am I? And then having that awareness to know of like, why am I upset? Like why am I disappointed? And that was one of the epiphanies that I had. But then another thing of, just, and I don't know how long into my meditation practice I was into, like, but I remember when I stopped being upset about when I could see myself or almost be aware of that of disappointment or whatever, and then just like let it go. And like, oh, just come back to the breath. Like just come back and let it go. And it was like, that's the practice. It's just being aware and letting go. Like that's it. And then like everything got better from there. It's crazy. And the people that aren't into meditation are hearing this and they're just thinking we're going to talk about commercial real estate, you know, lucky you because you got the extra treat of hearing people talk about meditating.
You just hit one of the nails on the head, because the people real truly why, in my opinion, is meditation teachers talk about mindfulness is all about realizing. It's like your mind wanders. You sit down to meditate and your mind wanders. The moment you realize you've wandered and you come back to your breath or silence your brain, that's the whole point of it. It's not staying there 100% because nobody does. It's just that moment where you can kind of gingerly just come back, as you said, right? Come back to that, come back to your breath. And for those people, and I've had this, I mean, this has been part of how I lead or coach for at least 10 years, maybe 15 years. There's a lot of people in every business, but I'll say in commercial real estate, oh, it sounds nice. It's really kind of a soft skill. I just have to learn how to negotiate better, or I got to buckle down. I need a better list, set priorities, work harder. It's that hustle culture. And trust me, the hustle culture works. And sometimes you just have to do that. No question. If you want to build long-term resilience, all of our bodies we're human. This is the way to build humanity. You want to be a good negotiator. How many times have you felt like you won a negotiation when you lose your temper? And this is the conversation I'll go through with people who's, demean or at least are kind of condescending about meditation as a tool. It's like, how often when you lose your temper do you win anything, right? How often when you get really frustrated do you get better at doing whatever you're trying to do? And you go through half a dozen of those little examples and people say, okay, so what's the magic pill? So I won't get frustrated. It's, this is it. This is learning. As a famous teacher said, the power is in the space between stimulus and response. That's where we have power, right in that little space. Elie Wiesel is the person who's coined that phrase.
That non-attachment. So that's one of the things of being able to separate, your thoughts from who you are. And I heard it once said, the the mind secretes thoughts like the mouth secretes saliva. Like they just happen, but you don't attach to them. Like if you have a thought, identify it, be aware of it, let it go. Write it down maybe, but let it go and just come back. And that is so key. And so going back to now I know when my flags go up, it's like now I have that awareness. Now I have that awareness of when that happens and I can let it go because that feeling, it's a physiological response, sure, but like you can't attach to it. You can't like be there. And that's one of the things, about your coaching and what you do because you have such a holistic perspective from philosophy to accounting, even though you don't want to talk about that, to the actual development and the real estate, like you being able to bring your whole self to these conversations and to this leadership and coaching is so important because then people can understand and bring the best out of them in all those areas.
Yes, all of that is true. And let's also be realistic. Coaching, by definition, is an uncomfortable relationship. When I do my job well as a coach, less so as an advisor and a consultant, but as a coach, you, as my client, are not comfortable. You may not even like me. Not unlike the gym analogy, right? When your coach asks you for another 5 reps after you just did 10 reps, you're not happy. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. It's the same thing.
So when you're advising in the two different areas, so you're a commercial real estate advisor, but then also you're a coach. Where do these lines blur and like how do you separate the two if you do at all?
It's a great question and one that I am working through right now because in my head, I've always said, I've the last 8 years I've been doing this work. separated, but the reality is they overlap significantly. And I have a few clients in practice, part of my practice, it's pure coaching. All I do, and they have been mostly in real estate, but I've had, engineers and financial planners, and a couple of attorneys that I've done coaching with. But when I work as an advisor, sometimes I just roll up my sleeves and I do some work. I'm right now for a couple clients, I'm in the middle of negotiating 4 very large commercial leases on their behalf. I've just reviewed half a dozen property budgets and made some corrections for another client where I was looking at numbers and doing some analysis and things like that. So, and then I spend a lot of time with 2 clients right now that are families in the real estate business. They're going through generational transition, dealing with different kinds of issues. I'm happy to share, I don't know that it answers your question directly, some stories about those. But the reality is, I toggle between. Sometimes I'm coaching, like, have you thought about a certain approach to how you're trying to develop your son or your daughter in the way they manage this business? I could tell you the way I think you should do it, but have you thought about this? And when I'm open ended and I ask those kind of questions, it becomes much more of a coaching.
So with that being said, what are some of the major things that you're seeing when you're working with clients and the generational transfer? What are some of the major things that you're seeing?
Well, one of the themes, if I think about the clients I've had the last few years, is we have a founder who's now in their late 70s, 80s, maybe even early 90s, generally self made, been very successful. And now they have the next generation coming in. Maybe it's even the second to the third generation. And more often than not, that next generation is a group of very well educated, smart people who've never been really challenged, who've never really been held accountable in a direct way. Because mom or dad did what moms and dads frequently do. They insulate. They don't want their kid. I mean, even when parents are demanding of their kids, they still kind of insulate them. And so I'll spend a lot of time educating, just flat out teaching parts of the business to that generation. Spend a lot of time working with the 2 generations, learning how to talk to each other in a way of, Dad, you're not going to be my boss for a lot longer because you're retiring. So I want you were very successful for 30 or 40 years. That doesn't mean I want to do the same thing or we want to do the same thing because A, the world's changed, and B, I'm different than you. So I want your advice, but I want to run the business this way. And having that conversation in a way that's not threatening to mom or dad and that is realistic with the kids. And when I say kids, they're usually in their late 30s, early 40s already.
When you say like this person's self-made and they did it this way, and I'll just preface this by saying, because what I do, my day job at Meisner, like sometimes when we work with family offices that they're like, nope, this is the way we've done it, this is the way we've always done it, like we're good here, we want your help with this, but don't worry about that. And we're like, but we have a way to do it so much better. But I mean, it's your asset. I mean, those are your assets. But how hard is that? Is that a big part of it on the operations side?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you, yeah, I can tell you there's one story that kind of fits that pretty well that happened last year. Fortunately, it was a relatively successful assignment where a family, in Southern California, immigrant family, 3 siblings. Dad died 4 or 5 years ago. Mom is still alive, but not at all involved in the business. One of the siblings was actually born outside the US. The other 2 were born, actually, that's not right. All 3 were born outside the US, moved here relatively early in their lives. So they grew up in the US. Dad, largely on his own, built a 5 to $700 million real estate portfolio. Came with a little bit of money, but nowhere near what you would expect to do that. So very successful, hard driving, kind of classic immigrant, roll my sleeves up, work hard, get out of my way kind of a story. I never met the man, but at least that's how he was described to me. One of the siblings worked with dad, smart guy, but never really learned how to work the business hard, lived a high lifestyle. Other 2 siblings, dad dies. Other 2 siblings were a little unclear about what was going on in the business. They were fine. Everybody was making a ton of money. But the other brother, they didn't like the way he was running it. And he was taking an extra, call it 700 to 1,000 to $1,000,000 a year out of the business for his salary. And they had about 10 or 12 employees. So they were getting ready to go to lawsuits. I got called in by a broker friend of mine who was doing some work for them. And I spent 9 months, and actually I just had an email exchange with them recently, but the first 9 months pretty intensively, let's turn the volume down on the dispute, step back from lawsuits, figure out a way to talk, identify what were the key issues. Let's not, the reality is in most family businesses when something like that goes on, a lot of that dispute is rooted in the baggage of when these kids were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And mom treated you better, or dad treated you better, or who knows why. And they can't or haven't let go of it. So we dialed the volume down. We identified that one of the big issues was we're spending too much money on all these employees. Okay. The one guy running the business didn't like it, but I got him to give up on that. We compromised. We outsourced everything. So I walked them through. I used my technical real estate skills and tools. Remember, we talked about tools, talents, right? I use those technical tools to put out RFPs. We get the right proposals. I get them to hire a property management, leasing, all that stuff. We transition and they fire in a respectful way, but they let go of their 8 of their 10 employees. Then I used the talents to develop a future focused way that they can talk to each other going forward. And that's not perfect. That's why I occasionally still get a call. One wants to complain about the other to me, but I'm not engaged at this point. I'm just there to kind of give them brainstorm a little bit. P.S. They're saving probably close to $500,000 a year in the way they did this. Everybody is relatively happy. And the funny story, if I can add one little bit of color, we have this meeting at the end of 9 months of work to kind of approve the final plan. There's 3 siblings, 2 brothers, 1 sister. Actually, it's 4 siblings. I apologize. I was confusing. So 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and their CFO, and me sitting in a room in Beverly Hills, beautiful conference room overlooking great view of Southern California up at the Santa Monica Mountains. We sit down, we go through, and there's no surprises. We go through the meeting. Yes, 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 yes. 90-minute meeting, an hour in, something comes up. One of the brothers gets really angry and screams and swears. Guy steps up, stands up, goes out of the room, slams the door. I'll look at each other. 10 minutes later, he comes back in. He's calmed down. Okay. We keep going. And now the 90-minute meeting is going to about 2.5 hours. The other brother stands up, swears, goes crazy. I'm done. This is out, slams the door. A few minutes later, he comes back in. Okay. What's the issue? We resolve the issue. So now the 90-minute meeting ends at 3 hours. Everybody's hugging and kissing. We're going to get together over the weekend with mom for something. That's a family real estate business. And that's, that was the full range of tools, talents, and techniques, right?
Yeah, to use it all. Yeah, to use it all. And especially like that type of situation, like that's a family, like there's going to be ups and downs and bumps, and you having to be there and bring your whole self to the party is key.
It really is. It's being sensitive to the fact that the issue being yelled about is not the issue involved. What's triggering things is the slight that one brother had against the other brother, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And the unfairness, or dad didn't treat me fair and now I'm taking it out on you. And I've done it enough times now that I get it. Patience, quiet. But I'm in a way, and this is some of the techniques, I'm also able to stand up and say, no, you're wrong, and challenge people in a respectful way to back off. And sometimes it doesn't work. I don't bat 1,000. People get angry and yell at me too. But more often than not, I'm able to be that trusted, neutral advisor.
It's a good place to be, especially if you like people, you like working people, and you want the best. And a lot of those cases, a lot of all cases, when you're working with people, with clients, with families in this situation, you know, you would hope that everybody has everybody else's best interests, at heart and on their mind. And once you start to get people to see that, like, hey, we're all going the same direction. We all really want the same thing. Let's find a way to do that together. I feel like that, and call it a technique maybe if you want, but if you can find ways to get people to see that you have common goals and this should be a win-win-win for everybody, that is key for progress in all things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And go back to like the sales piece of it. When you can talk to a client or, a tenant or somebody and have them truly understand that you have their best interests, especially in commercial real estate, and it can be very type A and very cutthroat. I feel like it's been my advantage being a good person. Or at least trying to be a good person and do the right thing, because over time it shows that you're just trying to do the best thing.
What were your lessons or your pivotal points for learning what we're talking about here, the importance of people and relationships and listening?
Well, I have a lot of them, and I continue to have a lot of them, but it's more of positive reinforcement on things, and it takes time, and relationships. But to start, I'll go back to the early one. When you mentioned that book that you had, the Tao
Now,
of Pooh, yeah. So when you said that you went back and read it many, many times, there's certain things that happened in my life that I didn't realize what they meant at that time. But if I go back and revisit that in my mind and my thoughts, I can realize how important that was. And I would say one to start off. I mean, there's so many, but one, I'm from Philadelphia, and I went to a Quaker school in from kindergarten to fourth grade. And Quaker schools have a thing called meeting house. And so every Wednesday we would just sit in silence. And then people would stand up and just, they could just say whatever they like, oh, I went fishing with my dad this weekend and we had a really good time. And then they'd sit down. And they're like, oh, my mom baked a cake this weekend and, it's really good. And I was happy. And they sit down. And I always thought that was so weird at the time. And maybe it is weird, but I'm like, now I see the importance of that, to sit as a community and be able to share and reflect on things. And I'm like, wow, that's so important. So that's just like one moment that I can tie back on. And a book that I read to tie back to, you said, so The Power of Now. I remember when I read that in the early 2000s, is the Eckhart Tolle book. And I thought, or at the time I read it, and I feel like I got a lot of insight out of it. And I felt like it was great. But then I went back and read it 10 years later. It meant a lot to me again, but in a completely different way. It was like the words were true, but I got to experience it as a different person, with more experience under my belt. Those are a couple of, man, I got so many. But also just in general, the people that I have in my life, my friends, my family, my coworkers, my business partners, they're all like, we all enjoy spending time with each other. We can be honest about things. We talk through things. We work through things. They're there for me when I'm going through stuff, and I try to be there as much as possible for them. So yeah, I don't know. It's there's not. I mean, there's so many. There's so many. And actually, when I journal, when I write things down, and I go back and explore those things. Well, thank you for asking the question, because first of all, I appreciate that. I actually love going through these things. There's been so many positive things that I've had in my life, even when they were hard, even and things still are hard many times. But I know that with good intentions, like, things always work out. Like, even in there's blessings in the lessons. Like, when things go hard, you have a tool with it when you come out the other side. So yeah, no, there's a lot. All of life, every day.
how do we learn or grow without at least a little bit of discomfort or
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can. I don't think you
well,
can.
you can learn a little intellectually without it, but learn and grow in a sense of change. What's the famous change formula? Basically, that change occurs when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of the change, right? So when the relief gets to be greater than the pain of doing nothing, that's when we change. That's just human nature. I mean, you said it really well. That's great.
When
I'm curious.
I think about all the jobs or opportunities that didn't work out, and I was really bummed out at the time, really upset, and it's like, man, I wanted that to work. Like I did my best, and why didn't it? And it's easy to take that personally and say they don't think I was good enough or they don't think I could do this. And but to be able to step back from that and just take those experiences from that, and if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And that's okay. But you still take those lessons into the next thing, and then hopefully you don't make the same mistakes if there were mistakes that you made. But sometimes it's just bad timing. It's just not the right place. And again, going back to the non attachment, not attaching your value or your worth to that situation.
It's so powerful. I can't tell you how much pain I've had over the years from that attachment. I mean, as soon as you mentioned the idea of kind of job, you know, problems or failures, I immediately flashed to one time where I got fired from a job. And it took me, I'd been on that job for 10 years and had on paper tons of success. But this was one of my most important lessons about ego, humility. And it took me 4 or 5 years to really recover from that trauma and see the lesson was, okay, that was a really important lesson in humility, right? And understanding that relationships are more important than the results, particularly if you're in an organization or on a team, right? I had lost sight of that.
So when you, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I think this really resonates with me, talk about like your identity and your ego and attaching to, I am this. I am, put the role, put the title there, or like this office is mine, or this power is mine. It becomes your identity. And when you attach to that and you're wearing it, when it gets ripped off of you or broken off of you, it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah, it's our bodies and our emotions react to it as if it is a life threatening circumstance. I mean, that's still that primal instinct in us, fight or flight, right? How do we react to trauma? We either run away from it or we fight back.
But you know what? Also, going to your point about like how do you grow without a little bit of pain and discomfort, sometimes a lot of pain and discomfort, but you have to try. Like you have to do that thing and understanding that, oh yeah, it's going to be hard and you're not going to be good at it as soon as you start. Like it's going to be hard. And I feel like going back to your question to me, all of these times and these moments and understanding that it's going to take a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years to actually be good at anything, and 10 years to be proficient at it. And understanding that has given me more grace, if you will, to be willing to try new things and not attach to if it works out, you know, quote unquote works out or not, because I know that as a person, I will be better for it going through those experiences.
So you just described a superpower. And I'm curious, how did you identify that and grow that muscle?
A lot of things that well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I really do appreciate that. And it's been from all the things that we just talked about for the past hour, all those things, the one, just going through it. And sometimes, you know, failure, again, air quotes, failure wasn't really an option. Like failure was a necessity. Like I had no choice but to fail. It was like but failing forward, and you lose a job. It's like, okay, well, you got to find a new one. What are you going to do? I don't know. You figure it out. But what can you do? What value can you add? And so just being able to sit with that, to think with it, to have, again, go back to the relationships, the people in your life that you can rely on for as a sounding board and as a resource is huge. Journaling, another thing, is being able to actually write things down. But when you fail enough times and you realize the failures aren't fatal, life is short. Keep failing until it clicks. And when it clicks, it's sweet.
Well, I think it's interesting how, like, I have a reaction when I hear the word failure, and it's just a cringe, right? And it really points to this whole concept of, there's The world occurs to us, shows up to us in lots of different ways it's represented by language. Because no matter what you see, internally, you use your language. So when I hear failure, my reaction is, right? So we can change how things occur to us with that language. I mean, failure doesn't have to be tied to, I am a failure. My identity is tied into only success is this one way, particularly if we're tied to success around external things that we don't control. We may influence, but we can't really control, right? And so if you're a salesperson and your goal is to sell $1 million worth of product and you only sell $600,000 worth of product, it's easy. I failed. Well, did you fail? You didn't hit the $1 million. Can't be naive about it, but you failed at a goal, but that doesn't mean you are a failure. Use it. And that's not an easy thing. It's an easy thing to talk about. It's not an easy thing to live. My own personal experience, but to be able to differentiate the fact that my identity is tied into how I show up. It's tied into my character. My identity, I like to think, is tied into I serve people, I honest, ethical, whatever. All of those things that are important. My identity for a long time was tied into I'm an ex-executive, or I'm an officer at a publicly traded company, or something like that, which were all really good. Loved them. Would still like some of those sometimes, but there's a difference between the attachment that you talked about and just some desire. Like, yeah, that would be really good to have.
Yeah. So, and that there's something I just talked about with my kids. Well, actually, my daughter and a couple of her friends that we drove them to school this morning. About the language and what that means. And the one that we were talking about this morning was nervous, and the difference between being nervous and being excited. And that's something that when it comes to public speaking, a lot of people have that. But what I was saying to them, but my daughter was saying, "Oh, I'm nervous for this test." And I've been trying with my kids to try to get that not word out of their vocabulary, but to use it less, because when you identify with that feeling, when it's just energy, like you could be excited, but the important part is physiologically, something's telling you that this is important. And when you put that label on it of nervous, that veers towards that negative failure. But if you just identify it as energy and flip the switch to say from nervous to excited, because it's really the same feeling. It's just a label you put on it. So I agree with you completely. Like the language you put on, whether it's failures, lessons, nervous, excited, all those things, it matters. It matters. And it does something to your mindset and helping you move forward.
There's a great book, short book, that deals with exactly what we're talking about now. I don't know if you ever come across it. It's called The Three Laws of Performance. Or have you ever
No, and I've
heard?
never heard of it.
Well, very simply, there's the book does it much more eloquently, but there are three laws of performance. The first is performance is rooted in how things occur to us. So we perform based on how we see things, our perspective, right? Perspective, our occurrence is rooted in language. How things occur to us is the way we describe it to ourselves or to other people. And the most powerful language, the third law, the most powerful is future-based language. So now we're talking about the past, but we're talking about the potential in the future. And so you just described that in your story about your daughter perfectly.
I feel like a lot of these concepts, these thoughts, whether it's like philosophy, these leadership books, it's all the same. Not the same, but it's all this a very similar underlying truth. You know, however those notes are played, and however harmonizes with you and who you are, and whatever it clicks. And that's why when you do read a book or you listen to a podcast or something, you're like, oh yeah, that feels right, because it's the truth. Because all these things are truth.
Well, and the amazing thing is that proves that, if anything can be proven like that, is you think about, you know, Stoicism was based on teachings of initially Greek philosophers that was, in the, early common era centuries, first, second, third, first century common era. Buddhism was several hundred years older, and the other side of the world. Taoism was also in Asia, but across, based in more in Japan, several hundred years earlier than that. And yet some very similar common lessons that come out of fundamental Christianity and Judaism. I mean, these are kind of common truths that have just been around a long time. And, it's not, it just, they're basic underlying observations about human nature.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Neil, wow, that hour went by fast. We have a
And it
couple
did.
minutes left. I wanted to make sure to give you some time, like parting thoughts. I just looked at the clock. I was like, oh man, parting thoughts.
No worries.
I'll include your links to your website and your LinkedIn and all those good things. But is there any parting notes that you want to share? And I know we talked about a lot of things. If you want to talk about cap rates or accelerated depreciation, we could do that. But yeah, is there anything you want to share with the audience before we go?
No, I think that I'll share a couple of things. I appreciate the opportunity, kind of open-ended opportunity. There's lots of people much smarter about real estate and the tech, the cap rates and all that kind of stuff. Not that I'm not good at it, but they're better at it. I would tell you that one of the really important lessons that I've learned, and I try and communicate to people I mentor and everything, is um, being able to identify and clarify kind of what gets you excited in life. Like, we all have bills to pay, or we all have obligations we have to take care of, and you can't change on a dime. But if we aren't intentional about defining a vision that gets us excited, we're never going to get there. And we might have a very successful life on paper and a very relatively happy life. And that's fantastic. But if we want to find some true underlying joy in life, we need to think through and develop a vision and begin to work towards it, even if we never get there, but we work towards it. And so, in real simple terms, my message is take a little time to be intentional about developing that vision. And I mean, obviously, we can go on a lot more, but I mean, that's really one of the most important, um, important is not the right word, resourceful points that I've learned, particularly the last few years of doing a lot of coaching.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And also, I would just add to that is that the journey is the destination. Who you become and the relationships that you make along the way is the gold, So just having that vision and working towards it, and, you never know who you will become in that becoming. Yeah. Neil Soskin,
And
thank
just
you
be
so
a
much, sir.
person.
Oh, yeah, there's that. Hey, Neil, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Be
All right.
well. I thanks